Have you ever noticed something strange in conversations? The person who talks the least is often the one everyone listens to the most. They don't dominate the discussion. They don't try to impress anyone. Sometimes, they simply sit there, calm, observing, silent. On it, people begin paying attention to them. People start wondering what they're thinking, because silence has a strange effect on human psychology. It creates pressure. It creates curiosity. And in many situations, the person who can stay comfortable in silence quietly becomes the most powerful person in the room. But why does this happen? Why does silence, something that looks passive, often produce such a strong social effect? To understand this, we have to look at several psychological mechanisms that shape human interaction. And the first one begins with a simple truth about the human brain. Most people are deeply uncomfortable with silence. When a conversation suddenly pauses, something strange happens inside our minds. Our brain starts interpreting the silence. Did I say something wrong? Are they upset? Are they judging me? Is this awkward? Within seconds, the brain begins generating explanations, because humans are extremely sensitive to social rejection. For thousands of years, social belonging meant survival. So our brains evolved to constantly scan for social signals, tone of voice, facial expressions, body language, and one of the most ambiguous signals of all is silence. When someone stops speaking, the brain struggles to interpret what it means. Is it disapproval? Is it disappointment? Is it boredom? Because the meaning is unclear, the mind quickly becomes uncomfortable. And when humans feel uncomfortable in social situations, they try to fix it. This is why most people rush to fill silence. They start talking. They add explanations. They make jokes. Anything to restore the feeling of normal conversation. But here's where something interesting happens. The person who remains calm during silence suddenly gains psychological advantage, because everyone else is working to resolve the tension, while the silent person appears completely comfortable. And that difference changes how the brain interprets status. In social environments, status is rarely communicated directly. Instead, status is communicated through subtle behavioral signals. Who speaks first? Who interrupts? Who apologizes? Who explains themselves? And perhaps most importantly, who feels pressure to talk? Think about high-status individuals in many situations. A respected leader in a meeting, a confident interviewer, an experienced negotiator. Very often, they do something simple. They pause. They let silence exist, and they don't rush to fill it. Why? Because people who feel secure in their position do not feel constant pressure to explain themselves. They don't need to prove their value every few seconds. They are comfortable letting others speak, comfortable observing, comfortable waiting. This calmness sends a powerful signal to everyone else in the room. It suggests confidence, authority, self-control. Even if the silent person never claims authority, the brain interprets their behavior as high status. Meanwhile, the people who rush to fill silence may unknowingly signal the opposite. They appear nervous. They appear eager for approval. They appear anxious about how they are being perceived. And humans are extremely sensitive to these subtle cues. Without realizing it, we constantly evaluate social dynamics. Who seems calm? Who seems pressured? Who seems emotionally stable? And silence plays a surprisingly powerful role in this process. But silence does something else as well. It creates psychological tension. When a conversation suddenly pauses, the brain expects resolution. Our minds are built to complete patterns. If someone begins a sentence, we expect them to finish it. If someone asks a question, we expect an answer. If a conversation pauses unexpectedly, the brain becomes alert. Attention increases. This is similar to something psychologists call the Zeigarnik effect. When something feels incomplete, the mind becomes more focused on it. Unfinished tasks stay active in our memory. Unanswered questions stay in our thoughts. Silence creates that same feeling of incompleteness. And when someone remains silent while others are speaking, attention naturally shifts toward them. People begin wondering what they are thinking, what they might say next, whether they approve or disagree. Their silence becomes a psychological spotlight. Ironically, the less they speak, the more attention they receive. This effect appears in many social situations. During negotiations, during debates, even during casual conversations. Imagine two people discussing an idea. One person speaks continuously, explaining every detail, adding more and more words. The other person listens quietly, occasionally nodding, occasionally pausing before responding. Which person appears more thoughtful? Which person appears more confident? Often, it is the quiet one. Not because silence automatically creates intelligence, but because silence changes how others interpret communication. When someone speaks constantly, their words begin losing weight. But when someone speaks selectively, each word gains value. The brain begins assigning more importance to what they say. This connects to another psychological principle. Scarcity increases perceived value. Rare things feel important, and the same rule applies to communication. If someone talks endlessly, their words feel abundant, and abundant things feel ordinary. But when someone speaks carefully, their words become scarce, and scarcity increases perceived significance. This is why some of the most respected communicators are also the most selective speakers. They pause before answering. They allow silence to exist. And when they finally speak, people listen, because silence has prepared the room. But silence is not simply about speaking less. It's about control. Controlled communication changes how people interpret intelligence. When someone speaks rapidly and constantly, the brain may interpret their behavior as impulsive. But when someone pauses, thinks, and responds deliberately, their speech appears more thoughtful. Even if the content of the message is the same, timing changes perception, and silence plays a crucial role in that perception. This is why many skilled communicators use pauses intentionally. A pause before an important statement, a pause after a question, a pause before responding to criticism. These pauses create rhythm. They allow ideas to settle. They signal confidence, but there is another reason silence holds power. It forces other people to reveal more about themselves. When someone feels uncomfortable with silence, they often begin sharing additional information. They elaborate. They justify. They explain things they did not originally intend to say. This happens frequently during negotiations. One person makes an offer, then remains silent. The other person feels pressure to respond, to clarify, to defend their position, and often they reveal more information than they planned, simply because silence made them uncomfortable. In this way, silence becomes a strategic tool. Not aggressive, not confrontationnel, but quietly effective. However, it is important to understand something. Silence is not powerful because it is mysterious. Silence is powerful because it reveals emotional control. Anyone can speak, but not everyone can remain calm when conversation pauses. Silence tests our comfort with uncertainty. It tests our need for approval. And people who can stay calm in silence signal something important about themselves. They are not desperate for validation. They are not afraid of small moments of awkwardness. They trust that their presence alone is enough. This emotional stability influences how others perceive them, because humans instinctively trust people who appear calm under pressure. But here is the surprising reversal. Most people believe influence comes from speaking more, explaining more, convincing more. They believe power in conversation means dominating the dialogue. Yet psychology often shows the opposite. The more someone tries to control conversation through constant talking, the less influence they may actually have, because influence is not created by volume. It is created by attention. And silence is one of the most powerful tools for directing attention. When words become rare, they become valuable. When pauses appear, they create tension. When someone remains calm in silence, others begin paying closer attention to them. So the next time a conversation pauses, notice what happens. Notice how quickly people rush to fill the space. Notice how uncomfortable silence can feel. And notice something else. The person who stays relaxed, the person who simply observes, the person who does not rush to speak, very often, that is the person everyone else begins watching. Not because they demanded attention, but because silence quietly gave it to them. And once you understand this psychological dynamic, you start seeing it everywhere. In conversation, in meetings, in negotiations, in everyday life. Sometimes, the most powerful message in a conversation is not the one spoken the loudest. Sometimes, it is the one surrounded by silence. And the next time you find yourself in an awkward pause, don't rush to fill it. You might discover that silence is doing more work than words ever could.